Audio implants. Background information. The concepts used in audio implants had been discovered in the first half of the 20th century, but the refinement of technology to take advantage of what had been discovered waited until the second half of the century. The development of audio implants ran on two tracks. One was the public medical research and the other was the secret Illuminati intelligence agency's research. Audio implants began to be publicly placed into people in the 1960s. The Illuminati was experimenting on some victims at this stage, and the military in the Vietnam War used auditory implant devices to aid communicating to their men who were sent into tunnels and who were placed into forest situations where audible noise would compromise their locations to the enemy. The Illuminati intelligence and military consortium was keeping the experimentation secret. It appears from looking at the worldwide research on audio implants that the Illuminati realized that the field was so ambiguous and open to so many different approaches that rather than straitjacket the research community by a specific strategy, they encouraged a wide variety of approaches in the research. Consequently, research by one group would overlap or duplicate research by another. Much to their credit, a few researchers rejected offers to get involved because they saw the sinister ramifications. By the 1970s, the intelligence agencies were willing to start using hundreds of people to experiment operationally with the implants. People in every state of the U.S. were selected as victims. Many of these implant victims had programmed multiple personalities already. The controllers were very heavy-handed with the people they implanted, and they used the full force of the Illuminati intelligence agency's power to keep these people under their control at all times. These innocent victims have had their lives totally destroyed. Some tried to fight back, spending thousands of dollars to get out from underneath the incessant audio messages that the implants sent, but the system was too big and too powerful to fight. Police, congressmen, psychologists and many other people turned their backs on these victims. Some victims who initially fought back gave up resisting, some committed suicide, and some continued to fight. Meanwhile, on the public track during the 1970s and 1980s, medical researchers kept putting more and more audio implants into deaf and hard-to-hear persons. Hundreds of people in the US and many hundreds in other nations such as the UK, Germany, Austria, Israel, Australia, France and other countries began to receive the cochlear implants. Australia was so proud of their audio implant research development they issued a postage stamp showing an implant device, Bionic Ear, developed in Australia. The question begs asking, if thousands of people have publicly received audio implants, isn't it obvious that the secret societies and secret intelligence agencies have done at least as much if not far more? Brief chronology of audio implants. 1790 First known attempt by Volta to electrically stimulate the ears. He shot approximately 50 volts of electricity into his auditory system, and experienced the sensation of a blow to the head followed by a sound like the boiling of viscous liquid. 1850 Electro-OTIATRICS was begun by otologists who hoped electricity could help ear diseases in various ways. 1925 sounds were created in people by radio engineers by placing electrodes near the ear with a modulated alternating current. 1930 Weaver and Bray discovered the principles used later in the cochlear microphonic implants. 1937 By passing an alternating electrical current in the audible frequency range from an electrode to the skin, Stephen, Jones, Lurie and Flatorp found they could have people hear sounds. For a number of years these men studied this phenomena. 1957 Journo and Aries in France woke the world up concerning the ability to electrical stimulate the auditory nerves and produce sound with their reports. A patient from France reportedly gets William F. House, MD, interested in developing an implant device. 1961 William House implants 2 patients with short-term audio implants. One patient receives a multiple electrode implant. 1960s intense research for audio implants is conducted in California in places like Sanford, the University of California, in LA, etc. The military uses audio implants operationally to be able to talk to soldiers in situations where external noise would compromise the location of the American soldiers, such as exploring tunnel system. 1970s. Various researchers around the world begin publicly implanting audio implants into people. The Illuminati and intelligence agencies begin to secretly implant people. This is known because many of the early victims can pinpoint a time in the 1970s when they got their audio implants. 1980. The FDA establishes federal regulations regarding cochlear audio implants. 1984. By this year, 369 people have publicly received the House cochlear audio implants, which have been implanted by 36 different clinics. The 3M cochlear implant system, House designed for use in adults, which is already in hundreds of adults, receives FDA approval in November. 1990s. Audio implants along with other implants begin to be used more aggressively by the mind control programmers. Successful intelligence operations are carried out with the aid of audio implants. Basics of how the implants can function. Thousands have publicly received audio implants, and thousands have received audio implants without their permission by the New World Order. The implants, whether secret or public, basically have to contain a receiver, S, B, a processor, C, a transmitter, D, electrodes or electrical stimulating device. When sound waves arrive to the human ear, the sound causes biological reactions all along the auditory pathway from the cochlea, the auditory nerve, the brainstem nuclei and the primary cortical projection areas. Each of these areas are fair game for machinations of the mind control researchers. There are brainstem potentials which originate in the auditory brainstem nuclei, primarily in the inferior colliculi. The public auditory implants produce a small electrical stimulus that bypasses damaged hair cells and directly stimulates the remaining auditory neural elements. This means that for the secret implants, the electrical impulse that is generated to stimulate the person to hear a sound or sentence is totally unnoticed by everyone but the victim. As mentioned before, psychologists are being used to shut victims up by declaring that they are crazy for claiming to hear voices. How do these psychologists know that the person isn't hearing voices from an implant? Some psychologists are declaring the implant victims are crazy, delusional, and insane, because audio implants supposedly don't exist, therefore it is useless to give any credence to the complaints of victims. In other words, psychologists are being used as the establishment's witch doctors to cover up the mind control activities of the New World Order. What's new? Establishment shrinks helped cover up the programmed multiplicity for decades by labeling the programmed multiple slaves, paranoid schizophrenics. During experiments, it was discovered that the skin of a person can pick up auditory vibrations, so tests were run to see if implants in other parts of the human body could be used for auditory implants. The vibrotactical system of the skin has an upper limit of sensitivity to 400 to 500 Hz. In contrast, the auditory system had a frequency range between 20 to 20,000 Hz and an optimum range of 300 to 3,000 Hz. The auditory system had a dynamic range of 130 dB decibels, which the vibrotactile had only a 30-35 dB range. In other words, using the skin like on the chest to send auditory vibrations to the brain was a very limited way to create sound. For most purposes it isn't a viable approach, even though some experimental auditory implants were placed in places like the chest. The ones that were tested only reconfirmed the suspicions that the best results are by using the inner cochlea and the auditory canal area. Dr. Begiches and later others showed that a nonlinear function will translate one frequency to another frequency, but although it does jump, this method is inadequate for the current mind control signals, and a linear function is used which operates simply on the energy that the implants have. Originally single-channel devices were used, but then multi-channel devices were soon found superior. The processing units of a device had to have an extraction method to determine the pitch of the signal and then would present a square wave at the rate of that frequency. Soon the miniature computers that made up part of the audio implant were made so that they were programmable. Some of the publicly implanted people, for instance some who got a 4mm cochlear auditory implant, who thought they were getting medical help, were later followed up a decade later by the intelligence agencies for their own agenda, and instead of just hearing the world, they got to hear mind control drivel from some handler communicating via the implant. As sound waves come into the public implants, they are fast Fourier transformed into many channels lying between say 100 and 4000 Hz. Each channel may be assigned to a specific electrode located on an array of electrodes. The electrodes are stimulated for instance at 300 pulses per minute. The transmissions go to receiver stimulators that then stimulate the subject to hear something. Fourier transforms have also been identified being used by human brains to encode memory. In order to keep their signals to their implanted victims secret, the network employs a tactic called piggybacking, where they piggyback their own audio transmission onto standard FM frequencies. Canal is the acronym for a system that is used simultaneously for transmission and reception via the use of a double frequency shift keying, DFS. Radio transmitters that send quick signals are variously called burst, squirt, squash, or high-speed transmitters. Uses of the implants. A. By themselves. B. With other implants. C. In conjunction with other mind control devices. Types of audio implants. Part A. Publicly admitted audio implants. Part B. Secretly implanted audio implants. Part A. Publicly admitted audio implants. The entire world has gotten involved in audio implant research. The British Cochlear Implant Group has been setting up implanting centers for the UK. Not all the publicly known implants will be listed here. For instance, some of those I chose not to list include some developed in Spain by Bosch and Colomina, the ones created in Thailand by upgrading American-made implants, and several made in East and West Germany before the wall went down, and the Swiss implant, which was simply the Austrian audio implant used with their own processor. 3M Cochlear Implant System House Design Model 7700 aka Alpha. BNFAI, EMG. Several models developed by Benfei in Cologne du Rhin, West Germany. It is digital, with a pulsatile signal and a programmable memory. The implant can be communicated with using an interface device hooked to a computer. The patient has a keyboard. It was first implanted in 1977 and has 8, 14 and 16 channels. It has been implanted into hundreds of people. British, for instance UCH, developed by Dawook, Forson and Moore in London and implanted with a single electrode in 1978 and multiple electrodes in 1990. The implant has bioglass and promontory grooves for the electrode, and neural network programming in its computer memory. Chen audio implant developed in Guangzhou, mainland China and first implanted in 1984. It was said by the Chinese that 20 people received this implant. Czechoslovakian implants were created by Vojvoda and Tichy in Prague and implanted in the 1980s into a few people. Fraser developed in London, and first implanted in 1983. It was notable because it had a round window in the implant. In the first few years, it was implanted into 56 people. They encapsulated the implant in a high-grade silastic rather than an epoxy, as some other European researchers had done. FRAYSE developed in Toulouse, France. This audio implant was implanted with its receiver in the chest. It was first implanted in 1981, and 22 people were said to have received it. GO8 developed in Shanghai, China by Li and Lin. INERAID, Fcosymbian, produced by the Richards Company, USA. In the Journal of the Acoustical Society of America, March 1994, Volume 95, pages 1677-1678, They have an article about a woman who had an implant in one ear and not the other. She was asked to compare the pitch signals from natural sources versus the right ear audio implant. The most apical implanted electrode was not as accurate as the more basal-located electrodes using an on-rate implant. Implex COM12 comes with an interfacing computer and a syncopation self-tester. LoRa developed at Antwerp, Belgium. These were first implanted in 1986, and had an internal canal antenna, a microphone entirely internal in the auditory canal, a preamp, an antenna, and a data control circuit. Only a few subjects got this implant. It comes with a computer, and an interface unit. It does have a programmable memory. METEL developed in Austria at Vienna and Innsbruck by Hotmer, and first implanted in 1977. Hundreds of people were implanted with this audio implant. Some were implanted externally with it and some internally inside the ear canal. It has one channel and a multitude of electrodes stimulating the audio channel. It is analog, and sends an analog signal. It does not have a programmable memory. MXN developed by Schwauard in Paris and first implanted in 1974. It had been implanted by 1990 into 179 people. Nucleus 22, Nucleus Mini System 22, and other Nucleus audio implants, aka Clark's implants, at least 2 models developed in Australia at Melbourne. This audio implant was first implanted in 1978. The implant is programmable from the outside. It has been implanted into many hundreds of people. It has a multitude of electrodes that stimulate the audio system. It is digital, sends a pulsatile signal, and has a programmable memory. The implant comes with a diagnostic and programming interface computer. The Australian government heavily subsidized with millions of dollars research into audio implants and got the Cochlear Corporation, Nucleus, going. Nucleus uses what is called multi-peak, which provides high-frequency information from 2000 to 7000 Hz. With this, 4 electrodes are stimulated in rapid succession, and special algorithms are used which change the relationship between the pulse amplitude and the pulse duration in order to allow 4 pulses to occur within a single frame. The Nucleus Mini System 22 was approved by the FDA for implantation in both adults and children. Storz Instrument Company's implants developed at University of Calif., San Francisco. Part B. Secretly implanted audio implants. There were several profiles of people that were used in the World Order selection of secret victims to implant. The following were criteria that they liked in the selection process: A. Vulnerable, such as single women. B. People who were already programmed with trauma-based mind control. C. Psychics, who had already told people they heard or saw things ordinary people don't. D. People not highly regarded by society, such as minorities, criminals, street people, mentally insane, who would not be able to find a support system to help them fight the experimentation. They also did the audio implants into some of their own intelligence agents, apparently to some who were getting somewhat difficult to their superiors. Because of this type of profile, and some other things this author learned, it appears that the initial 2 decades were used more for experimentation and development than they were for actual operations. However, with more than 2 decades of experience, they are now fully operational. From watching their interaction messages with victims of audio implants, it is clear that they are not in the testing stage, but are fully operational, and have a full cadre of trained operatives, men and women, to staff the secret bases from which they monitor and broadcast signals to their slaves. They staff their bases with 3 shifts, and the graveyard shift leaves approx. 6 a.m. In other words, from what we can tell, they are using standard shift times for the audio implant control staffs. Cochlear implants. There are cochlear implants for auditory control secretly implanted without permission. A rubber molding skin color covers the outer lining of the ear canal. There are tiny slits in this lining, which when pushed to the side would show the presence of coils and a plastic rod wire embedded in the area. Sometimes burn marks occur on sides of face due to intense heat generated by implants, which is painful. Dental auditory implants. At least a dozen victims have complained that after their teeth were capped they began hearing voices. Other sources indicate that during the filing process implants are being put into people. This is the type of implant placed into Jay-Z Knight and left dormant for many years until they decided to activate her as New Age guru. Ridge implants. These implants can produce theta waves and even voices. They are designed to suppress a particular type of thinking. The body may be sent into paralysis or given various stimulus response stimuli in order to suppress certain thought patterns. If the slave begins to have certain thought patterns that threaten the programming and programming structures, these implants kick in to divert the person's mental activity to something else.